Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Solutionaries here on Regenerative Media TV. I'm your host, Michael DiMartino, and I'm back in California from Colorado doing some traveling. And as many of you know, over the last year, have been very focused on our Build Back Green LA initiative, which is a response to the wildfires that happened just literally days over a year ago. So for those of you who have seen some of the previous interviews and some of the content, you understand that we've been on the ground there talking with people and doing support, not just some support for the people there with different types of health and wellness programs and trauma support and communication. We had our big event in October, our 5-day event there in the Santa Monica area. But we're also talking to people about the various obstacles, hurdles, and challenges they have after the fire. And most importantly, too, of how they can kind of get building back and getting back on track with their life. And that might consist of litigation, working with what their rights and what they can have happen financially related to the town, county, state, federal government, insurance companies, but also right now, our big focus is helping people at our Soil Summit on February 21st in Altadena to understand how they can actually clean up the soil so that the area that they want to repopulate isn't toxic. So today, I'm really happy and honored. A colleague of mine, Keontae Murphy, had connected me with them. And one of the biggest issues that we found with the post-fire reality is people navigating the legalities of what can be done, what can't be done, refusals to return, cleaning up the soil, but also navigating the complexities of things like insurance settlements, lawsuits, those types of things. So today, without any further ado, I'd like to welcome my guest here from the Schack Law Group in Southern California. I'd like to welcome Shannon Nocon. So welcome to Solutionaries.
Hi, Michael, and thank you so much for inviting me to chat with you today. We really appreciate it. I have worked with Schack Law Group for the last about 9 years, and the primary part of my practice and the firm for all of that time has been fire litigation, primarily against utility companies for utility-caused wildfires. The owners of the firm, Alex Schack and Kathy Schack, they got involved in this type of litigation in 2007, which is when the San Diego wildfires occurred. Their neighborhood and their house were directly affected, and so they put together one of the first lawsuits of its kind to assist victims in San Diego with that fire. And having lived through not only the litigation, but the experience of the fire themselves and the damage to their own home, it's become really a passion of Alex and Kathy and a passion of our firm to really provide as much help and assistance as we can to people who have gone through subsequent wildfires. So in my practice, I've worked on fires throughout the country at this point, both starting in California with the 2017 North Bay fires, several in Northern California, several in Southern California, and then now have expanded our practice into assisting victims of the Maui fire, as well as the Marshall fire in Colorado, and additional fires in Nevada. So it's become a large part of our practice. It's a very difficult thing for people to go through. The stories I hear from clients every time are heartbreaking, and it's a very difficult process, but litigation can really help provide the bridge that's missing between your insurance, which is usually not enough to compensate you for all of your losses, and recovery and moving forward. So although litigation can take a while, it's not as fast as your initial government resources or insurance. It can really help people take that next step forward and move ahead from the fire instead of constantly being bogged down by the loss and the damage that they've suffered.
Well, amazing work. I know when we had first met, I talked to you about, I first got involved in this type of work, which is more what I call like regenerative response, dealing with people and also, of course, the reality of the land. But I kind of first learned about this area because I was living in Grass Valley area, which is literally just, an hour from Chico, if that. And of course, the horrific Paradise Fire, which affected, over 8,000 people. So at that time, I was a journalist, and I went there and I saw not just again, the human trauma, the fallout from the fire. I also saw what was happening with the debris removal, whether that was a more immediate or not immediate. Of course, at that time, I think FEMA was still much more active and kind of not defunct and defunded as our current administration. But also, I saw a lot of what was happening with the disaster capitalism, the cleaning of sites, the removal of millions of trees, some that were burnt, some that weren't burnt, and then of course a lot of the contaminants from in this area we have the gold mining industry, and of course the materials from the home. So what I was curious about, do you have a basic experience? And of course we're talking about utility company. Of course that one, I believe at that point was PG&E. And one of the people I know, Cat Fury, had worked on that. I think they eventually came to something like 1,200 lawsuits. But do you have an overall experience as far as dealing with these large companies, utility companies, your experience, and also any kind of statistics or numbers or something that you can share with us about the success when these types of horrific events happen and people actually being able to be compensated?
Sure. So I don't have statistics. I can speak from my own experience, having worked on probably somewhere around 10 to a dozen fire litigations at this point. These cases have not gone to trial. There's one case that went in Oregon and they were successful about 3 years ago. But every other case has settled and resulted in recovery for almost all of our clients, unless there were extenuating circumstances. So their successful litigation provided the liability of the utility is there. In terms of accountability, they really do hit corporations where it matters most, which is their pocketbook. We have seen the litigation not only produce results for victims, but also really encourage and require utility companies to take steps to prevent these fires. They are government granted quasi monopolies. They receive taxpayer funds to conduct fire safety and prevention measures, and they are rightfully held accountable when they fail to do so. And the lawsuits have pushed, like for example, PG&E was forced to enter bankruptcy after the North Bay 2017 fires and has since put in additional fire safety measures like public safety shutoffs and other resources that hopefully make a difference in preventing these disasters or at least limiting the scale of them going forward. Another good example is San Diego. They had major fires in 2007 that were utility caused. And since then, knock on wood, have seemed to avoid causing anything major. And a huge part of that is that after 2007, they have committed a ton of resources to putting in one of the most sophisticated fire prevention systems of any utility in the country and have started to serve as a model for other utilities since the 2007 fires. So the hope is that by bringing these lawsuits, by holding utilities accountable, that kind of model can spread throughout the country.
Wow, amazing work. Yeah, I know a lot of issues up here at the Paradise Fire was the fact that it was just aged out infrastructure that created a lot of the problems here. And of course, I know typically in these types of corporate models, it's really about the bottom line. They don't like to spend money. But obviously, in these horrific situations where thousands of people are affected, they have to put more attention on that. So, amazing work in just getting them to take more corporate responsibility. Particularly, you're just working with litigation against utility companies, is that correct?
In my line of work, yes, there are other attorneys that handle if, for example, if people are having issues with their insurance or disputes with contractors for rebuild. Obviously, there are lots of other elements that go into fire recovery, but my practice has focused on utility litigation.
Great. Well, that was one of my questions, and you answered it. Thank you so much. Of just about people are having a lot of challenges right now about general cleanup. I've talked with some of the people there who haven't even had debris removal yet on their property, and then of course there's people that the land hasn't been cleaned up and they want to get back on the land. I was up there recently and people are literally just putting small trailers in and living in a debris pile or on top of a lot of the soot and ash, which again can have really profound and negative health impact too. But that was one of my questions about for people that are having challenges with contractors or insurance company. You do have an arm of the group there, the law group that does deal with that.
Yes, we have worked closely with other attorneys that do that type of litigation, that do bad faith litigation, that will deal with contractor disputes. And certainly we can serve as a resource for directing people or pointing people in the right direction to resolve those problems. In my experience, the cleanup, and particularly people whose homes did not burn, but who have suffered extensive smoke and soot, their house is contaminated, their insulation or anything like that, the insurance companies and other resources can give people a particularly hard time with compensating them for that or agreeing to do the full scope of the work. So I would always encourage people to explore every avenue, whether that's litigation or just being the squeaky wheel to make sure that you get the compensation you're entitled to for those types of damages.
Oh, fantastic. So for those people who might be watching this video, what would be the basic first step to kind of onboarding with your firm?
Sure. So one of the primary reasons people come to us for the litigation or eventually come is most fire victims will find that they are vastly underinsured for their losses. And that's for a variety of reasons. One being that your policy, provides certain limits that just don't end up being enough. The cost of rebuild is significantly more when there's a lot of competition to rebuild. Your personal property is typically compensated based on the value of your property at the time of the fire, which is usually far less than what it will actually cost to replace. It can also take a significantly longer time for you to get back in your home than your insurance will compensate for. So there will be underinsurance in that regard. And then there are also things that your insurance company just doesn't cover, like personal injuries, emotional distress, missed work, lost income. Those are all losses that are very real and suffered by many people as a result of a fire that there just isn't insurance for. So that's where litigation can come in to help you recover those losses that are not covered by your insurance. So for anyone interested in participating, our firm's process is I or someone in my office would conduct an interview with you, understand your experience during the fire and its impact and the damages that you've suffered. From there, we have you execute a retainer agreement. Our firm operates entirely on contingency for these cases, meaning we don't get paid if you don't get paid. So in the event there is a settlement, our recovery is 20% of your gross recovery plus any costs that we've fronted along the way. So if your case needs an expert or an evaluation, we front those costs and those only get reimbursed out of the recovery. From there, once we've signed a retainer, we file a complaint on your behalf, and then we walk you through all of the steps of the litigation. One thing I like to point out to fire victims is that participating in this type of litigation is almost always very different than participating in any other normal lawsuit. It's much more structured, it's much more focused on establishing your damages and what you've suffered as a result of the fire. And it is typically a lot less work and a lot less invasive than a normal case. There's very rarely depositions of plaintiffs. Like I said, nearly almost none of these cases go to trial. So it's really not as big a burden as people might think, and it can really open a new pot of recovery that can help people move forward.
Amazing. So a couple other questions I had before we finished. I know some people had signed with some other law firms and kind of a year later are feeling quite frustrated about, I know there's been a lot of media and different people writing petitions and organizing communities, and some of them have received gag orders, like not to say anything about anything, whether it's their particular case or about their opinions or perspectives or thoughts at all about what's occurred, the amount of time, the lack of response, those types of things. And then also, I know some people I talked to had received like kind of refusal to return letters to their property, and they're kind of in the dark wondering. So in these kind of strange other types of situations, is that something you're familiar with, or is that something you would still interview someone about and kind of assess the validity of any litigation?
Sure. So, with regard to people who have retained counsel, first, I share your frustration with the pace of litigation. It can be mind-numbingly slow and frustrating, particularly in a case like this, where there are thousands of plaintiffs, and especially in the Palisades case, there are a lot of defendants who are potentially liable. And that, in and of itself, just creates an administrative and procedural puzzle that can take a long time to work through. And I fully appreciate that victims feel that that is an unreasonable amount of time and frustrating. So I share that. Um, with regard to gag orders or not saying anything, I can't speak to the advice that other attorneys give or their reasons, but I can say that in any case, it can be very important to control the narrative and to also keep your evidence and your valuable testimony for a time when it can be used in the most effective way. So that is only to say that there may be reasons that attorneys would prefer that their clients testify in a formal setting as opposed to putting something out in the media that can then be spun or used against them, or maybe just used in a way that's not useful to the litigation. That said, every client should expect open communication and regular updates to the extent they're requested from their attorney. So if that's not something that you feel like you have with your attorney, you don't feel like you have a level of trust or communication that you're comfortable with, your attorney choice is your selection, and you should always feel free to consult another attorney if you feel like you're not being served in the correct way. Um, with regard to the inability to return, if people have received notices like that where they can't return to their properties at this time, the reasons for that can really vary, and it's something that we are happy to try to answer questions on to the extent people have them. The most important thing is always to figure out where the notice is coming from, what agency, what government, or why, and then also to figure out what the reasons are for why you're unable to return, because those can really vary depending on the location of your property, the nature of damage. So consult an attorney, try to get as much information as you can on those things, and don't sit on them for too long because that can create its own problems as well.
Great. And last question, can you have a sense of kind of like timelines? Have you had any, particularly for the Altadena or Palisades fire, have you had any litigation that's been completed, or what can people expect? Is this something that could happen in 2026, or, maybe case by case? Is this something that can stretch on for years?
Sure. So it's case by case. There are obviously cases that can take a long time. As a general matter, fire litigations that I've worked on have taken somewhere around 3 years from the date of the fire to resolve. A lot of that is dependent on the judge and how quickly the parties can push for a trial date. Trials make people get work done faster, they make people get real about money faster. So in the Eaton fire, the trial is set for early next year. So the case is well on its way. Discovery and depositions are happening right now. Expert work will happen over the summer. So I'm hopeful that that will mean that in the Eden fire in particular, that things will pick up in terms of settlement discussions as this year progresses, given the trial date in early next year.
Great. Well, I would have to say I really appreciate your time, and I really respect the fact that you're helping to stand up for people kind of against the little guy right now, because typically, again, putting profit over people and their lives and the loss of their livelihood can be really traumatizing, and it's something that people can carry their whole life. So I really want to thank you for your time and having this opportunity to kind of connect with you. I've actually learned a lot on this call, and my awareness continues to expand about these types of things. For those of you who are watching, we spent some time here this morning talking with Shannon Nocon from the Schack Law Group in Southern California, doing amazing work to help people kind of regain their life and their homes and their properties from the wildfires that recently occurred in Southern California, both in the Pacific Palisades area and, of course, Altadena and the Eaton Fire areas. So thank you so much for your time and amazing work that you do. We appreciate you, and I will definitely be passing this on to people to make them more aware about not just your professionalism and success with your company, but also that you have some compassion and you're really helping people. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak with you and your listeners. We really appreciate it.